Thank you very much. Well, I'm very excited to be here this afternoon, or this evening now, and I'll introduce Kevin in just a second. But they said to me, they called me up and said, hey, how would you like to have a fireside chat and talk about end-user computing and what's exciting about end-user computing right now? And I said, that sounds great to me. Now, as a blogger, I get to say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if somebody created this product that did this? Or you should take this product X and mix it with product Y, and then we could do Z with it. Well, of course, there are the people on the other side that actually have the hard work of making that happen. So for the next 28 minutes, you'll get me on the side of saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this could happen? And somebody else on the side of, hey, we make it happen. So let's welcome also to the Fireside Chat, Kevin Kiley from VMware.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so end-user computing, I mean, it's mobility, it's identity, it's desktops, it's...
It is all of the above, and maybe before I go any further, I'll pile on the love fest here and say what an honor it is to be up here with Jack. If those of you in the audience who don't yet read brianmadden.com, I hope you'll earmark it right now and take a look. Required reading for our teams, it's certainly one of the best sources. So I was very excited to be up here tonight and do this with you. So that out of the way, let me talk a little bit about where we are on this topic. This is obviously what we focus on. I've met many of you over the years, and probably at this conference more than anything, we've gotten to connect with a lot of your organizations. I came in as part of the AirWatch acquisition just over 3 years ago that VMware did. It was, and still is, the largest acquisition VMware's ever done. And it was done with this thesis of, this is where things are going. We see a convergence of the way compute will be done, that mobile is opening up new capabilities and potential that wasn't there before. VMware already had, of course, a tremendous amount of pedigree and virtualization and doing that at the VDI side. Bringing these things together and enabling more ways for employees to be productive was kind of the idea of why they went shopping and picked up AirWatch all those years ago. So very, very important to where we are today, and this is absolutely the crux of what we're working on.
Yeah, and what an interesting time it has been. I remember seeing slides years ago with a phone and some web apps and some virtual desktops, and I don't know if there were physical desktops on them at the side, and then some mobile apps and some SaaS apps and some Windows apps on the other side, and a whole bunch of arrows in the middle connecting those. And somehow we're going to get all of these apps, including the legacy ones that run on the legacy platforms that cause us such painful problems like WannaCry last week, all of those through the mix of arrows to everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we had some of those early meetings as well. And at the time, VMware had been looking at how do we virtualize a phone and do some of these things in a way that was very containerized. Some of those ideas have been borne out over the years in some ways, and many haven't. But anyways, that was a lot of probably what directed the acquisition for us.
Well, so, and I couldn't help but notice over the last 3 weeks or so, VMware has been very busy. And I'll start with the most recent of the announcements. It was a VDI-related announcement.
It was, yeah. VMware and Microsoft, hell is frozen over. We had a big announcement that our Horizon VDI product will now be supported on Azure. So this was something that we've been working on for quite a while. It was a huge announcement for us, as you can imagine, to get their agreement. And actually, we found a really great partner in Microsoft on this. Funny enough, I joke a little bit about the frosty relationship, the history there. But Microsoft's actually been very, very strongly partnered with us on a number of the EUC fronts. Even ahead of this announcement with our VDI product, of course, Windows 10 was a real shift in the way that they were looking at how devices can be managed, PC lifecycle management, and have really moved over to more of an EMM model, I think it's fair to say, and most would agree, in the way that you now enroll your device and receive those instructions. And all of the management that we do, much like an iPhone or an Android device, you now see in Windows 10. So I pointed out as a good example of where we really started building this great partnership with Microsoft, and the way that they've now opened up Windows 10 management and worked very closely with us in partnering on that launch. So this was just the latest episode, but a really, really big one for us.
Yeah, and all of that Windows 10 stuff is super interesting. But on the VDI front, thinking back, 2012, even 2010, even 2008, when we were thinking, okay, so what is VDI's role going to be? And we spent a lot of time working the kinks out of VDI, storage and GPU virtualization and things like that. But in the meantime, and this informs a little bit of my background. So I joined a blog that covered desktop virtualization, and I was blogger number 3 at the desktop virtualization blog. And they said, hey, we keep on getting all of these pitches about what to do about BYO phones and BYOD iPads. This was 2011 when I joined. And they said, go figure out what's going on with all of that BYO stuff. I think there's something called MDM that we've heard of. And so in the meantime, VMware acquires AirWatch. We spend a lot of time talking about mobile device management, mobile app management, and now identity management. But in 2017, VDI, DAS, we're thinking about that a lot now. And as we're thinking about how the kinks of desktops as a service get worked out. So who would have thought that 2017, one of the topics that I'd be most excited about is DAS.
Yes. How about that? Everything old is new again, and we can talk a lot about this because obviously this is an area of huge interest for us. It's where we're seeing a lot of our growth right now as well. And if you look at where things were even just a few years ago, 2012, certainly 5 years ago, the technology has changed dramatically in our capabilities, the performance. Most importantly, I think the economics have really, really shifted, and there's a lot of fresh reasons for organizations to look at this technology again.
Yeah, now after, okay, say an organization, they've almost these days, you can't help but becoming an organization, even if some of the applications come in as shadow IT. Mm-hmm. But hey, say an organization, they're on file sync and share now, they're on a SaaS CRM, and suddenly now 2017 or 2018 seems like a good time to look back at, so now what can we do with those Windows applications that are tied to a desktop version of Windows and bring those forward into the future?
Absolutely, without all the expense and security and risk of having to go through that porting or continuing to serve it up. I think that's a lot of what's driving it for our business today. We have new classes of employees that maybe didn't carry company-issued devices in the past. The economics weren't there to issue them a laptop or a corporate phone. But now they've got a device that's very capable that they're bringing in anyway. And why not serve up some of these capabilities if we have that ability to do so in a way that's very secure? So whether it's full MDM management or delivering a workspace where we've got just a containerized capability to make a small corner of that device work-enabled, whether that's serving up an application that we virtualized, a SaaS app, a mobile app, or any number of capabilities, doing it in a way that really respects that user's privacy and it's their device, but at the same time allows them to do some work on it.
Yeah, exactly. So virtualizing a legacy Windows application is one way to deal with that. But let's talk about building new mobile applications. And I'm teeing you off to talk about something that you guys did recently. But I look and I see the cornucopia of ways that are out there to help enterprises more easily create mobile apps other than doing it entirely from scratch. But tell me about this Apptelligent acquisition.
Yeah. So as you said, a busy 3 weeks for us. Apptelligent is the most recent acquisition we've made as a company, and of course very important to EUC. If you're not familiar with the name, the company rebranded not long ago, but Criticism may be another name that you were familiar with. A terrific outfit that's been around for a few years. They were Google-backed. They'd done a lot of very interesting work around mobile application testing and giving you better insight into user analytics. So while we're not getting into the mobile application development space, we have a number of great partnerships there that we really, really value and are going to continue to press. This gives us a whole lot more insight than we've ever had at what's happening at the application level. And if you think about it, again, what our core mission is here to make these users productive, to deliver great experiences for the mobile workforce, we were always kind of blind to what was happening at the application level. I could see if that device was maybe under management, if it had the right apps, but we didn't get a lot of insight into how the app was being used or whether there was a problem with it. What this product will open up is new potential for us to see, all kinds of health around connectivity, performance, et cetera. If there's an issue with someone's device, I don't today know, is it the device itself? Is it the OS? Is it the version of the OS they're running? As we talk about Android, of course, the fragmentation there of which carrier it's on, which build, et cetera. There's so many variables that we can't get into understanding. This gives us a lot more understanding of which versions of the app or which instances of the app are having problems, and it gives us a lot more insight then into troubleshooting that or getting in front of those things before they need to be addressed.
Yeah, so that visibility is certainly interesting, and I think this is another one of the situations where I as the blogger can say like, oh, I think it would be interesting if this acquisition would lead to a next step, and so I'm wondering. Certainly, it seems that something that this is. Whereas an MDM or an MAM caters to the people that are deploying the apps, this is something that more caters to the people that are developing the apps more than any other previous steps may have.
It certainly does. Has a lot of value for them, I'll say that. Again, that's one dimension of what we see this being useful, and the other would, of course, be the administrator, or again, the person who's really responsible for the success of that app being deployed and being well utilized. Without saying too much, I'll say this sincerely. This is one of the most interesting acquisitions. We have some very big plans for where we're going with this. So more to come, more to come.
No others that you can tell us about today.
Please come to VMworld, of course, this summer, and I think we'll be talking a lot about this acquisition and what it meant for us.
Well, so I don't think we can talk about apps without talking about the idea that, sure, being able to physically view something on a mobile device that may have been difficult before because it wasn't a screen size or it didn't have the right buttons, that's one thing. But when I think about the world of adding audio and video into an application and photos and push notifications and all of those things, as Maribel says, to enable the right time experience and the right type of data, there are a lot of things to get excited about adding all of those new mobile-specific capabilities into apps.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah, no, delivering a richer, more timely and relevant experience is what it's all about.
And speaking of that, the cameras these days, that not only are the cameras, my camera on my phone has a zoom lens now, but have you guys all been playing around with all of the machine vision and AI experiments out there on the web right now? Who's seen that thing where like you draw an outline of a cat and it'll fill in the photo of a cat? Or there are people that are using machine learning and neural network models to read a whole bunch of recipes and create new recipes or things like that. And when you just begin to think about, hey, it's so easy for my app an app on a mobile device to access the camera. In a couple of years, when we add computer vision into that application, what's next for that?
The singularity is coming, and be wary.
So my other thing that I'm very excited about right now, and that I would encourage everybody to do, it may seem like machine learning and artificial intelligence is maybe a couple of years removed from having it in your applications. But go out and play with all of the different ML and AI experimentation websites that are out there. They're fun and they're silly, but they give you an idea of the power that will be part of your applications in 3 or 5 years from now. Yeah.
I will say just on that particularly around AR and the way that some of this is being filled in, and another set of announcements coming out of Google I/O, of course, if you were following those with what they're doing with VPS, I believe is their indoor location system that will leverage some aspects of machine learning as well as trying to understand patterns and heat mapping of how it sees devices moving through a building. And then, of course, their Lens project. these will bring in some element of AR into the enterprise. So some of your organizations that are thinking about how do we better lay out the workplace for manufacturing or retail or any number of environments, there's going to be real application for these technologies.
Exactly, like that, that example earlier of the elevator repair people, or if anybody, I'm sure a lot of people in this room were at AirWatch Connect last year and saw Blake Brannon on stage with the doing the warehouse
HoloLens.
demonstration. Yeah, so this stuff, again, not to belabor the point too much, but all the different things that may look like toys online right now that we should be playing with them now. And not to mention, if we were back at RSA this year, that we saw that so many security vendors had machine learning, especially for behavior analysis and looking for anomalous behavior. And that's an example of something that can be coming into our identity and access management, for example, tools very soon. And that's exciting stuff. Yeah.
I mean, again, location in this case, or using some of these other inputs that are now available, becomes yet another factor in identifying who that person is and perhaps validating what it is they're trying to do. Somewhat off topic, but Maribel mentioned the Boeing example of their use of AR, and this is one, again, where we've been very closely partnered with them. If you think about in manufacturing, somebody being up on that aircraft wing, they maybe have 4 flights of stairs. If I'm actually working in some subsystem of the wing and wiring something, and I have to refer back to a schematic or some kind of plans for what it is I'm working on, having to come all the way back down the stairs to get access to that information or to pull up a training video, very, very costly. And this, of course, to them adds up to the number of days that they take to manufacture a 777. If that user up there has a glass, or they have maybe a smart device that's been enabled, and they can actually see the same systems and see some of the plans that come together, or perhaps if I'm watching through some sort of wearable, I could see a training video perhaps in the corner of my eye that shows me how I'm doing it. This enables them to work better, work faster, and obviously work a lot smarter. The security aspect of it, I think, is also very interesting, though, as you start thinking about how you're able to map out where somebody is. I may not be able to access other points of validation, but knowing that this user is in a particular part of the building or that they're working on something might help enable what they're trying to work on, whether it's authentication or simply showing them the relevant content that they need as part of what they're trying to do.
And then the authentication can be much more granular, and we don't have to bother the users when we know a lot about what they're doing. And if it looks fishy, then we can bother them to do more factors of authentication.
Absolutely. If I'm, again, up on that 777 wing and I'm working on something, I shouldn't be able to access the plans for the F-22 or some other aircraft that I'm working on. So it all ties together in a way that really supports the end user's experience, making things great for them and intuitive and easy for them to get into what they need to. But at the same time, we're subtly strengthening security by making sure that they're served up to the right systems.
So speaking of augmented reality, and I know there was an IoT announcement recently, an open question that my colleague Gabe Knuth and I have been pondering, and that I'm sure many people in this room are pondering, the applications for IoT and augmented reality. If your business involves many things, it's quite clear that instrumenting the things and using AR to understand the relationships between the things is quite crucial. What I think some of us may be thinking about is if we work at a business I work for a media company, so our things are pretty much just like laptops and projectors. And so the open question that we've been pondering, and I'll be curious to talk to all of you throughout the rest of the show, is AR, VR, IoT. If your business is less related to individual things, what can you still do with it?
Yeah. We have this debate, internally, because we're the end user computing division of VMware, and the devices you're referring to here don't really have an end user per se. It may be a light fixture, it could be the HVAC system, it could be any number of other assets that don't necessarily tie to one individual. So we've had to even wrestle with, is this part of our charter to go after these things, and does it belong somewhere else in the organization? And ultimately, I think we're working through that now. We've seen a lot of this evolve out of that space. The Coke Freestyle machines, Neil Garner's here, are an example of that, where that was sort of our early foray into starting to manage some of these technologies that historically weren't available, that wasn't considered an IT asset. And now it's a very important one. We see other systems like this that are coming into that, and they'll share some parallels in terms of how they're considered for management, and what sort of health telemetry do we need to be pulling off of those things to make sure that they're working as they're supposed to, and also that they're secured. So we're going through that same evolution and broadening our scope as we think about what this could look like a year from now, 10 years from now.
So the last topic that we got talking on when we were on the phone earlier this week was devices. And who agrees that sure, 2007, 2008, 2010, when the iPad came out, those were huge years for devices. But who would agree that 2017 right now is a really big time for devices? We have Windows 10, which can be managed like a mobile device. We have Windows 10s, which is even more like a mobile device. We have Chromebooks with Android apps on them. We have phones that turn into desktops. We have Apple doing a very strong marketing campaign about using the iPad Pro as a laptop replacement. I mean, there's everything going on right now. And the one thing that I will remark on is that now that we've had several years to advance our identity and SaaS and mobility and device management and app management strategies, all of these devices, they don't necessarily mean an impending panic like BYOD when it first, when BYOD first came in shadow IT. There was, what are we going to do with these things? Now that this 2017 period of device excitement is coming in, hey, at least we're prepared to manage and secure them. The biggest challenge, and this is what's most exciting, is how do we use them to get business advantages?
Yeah, I'll underline the interest in devices does seem to be like it's really front and center again right now. After so many years of everyone saying it's just the data, forget about the device, we seem to be, again, playing.
We're coming full circle.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's going to continue to be a big year. Obviously, Cupertino friends, Apple, have a big release coming later this year with the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, and there's a lot of very interesting technology that's expected to be included in that release. Samsung, if you saw at Mobile World Congress, they launched their S8 device, which they've really positioned as being sort of your all-in-one device. And a lot of people have made this promise over the years. But they've made a pretty compelling case that this device will go from being the phone in your pocket to going right into a cradle that immediately transforms into a full desktop experience and can tie back to VDI systems, but is also pretty capable on its own. LG's in the room here, and they've done some great stuff. There's so many interesting device launches this year. I think that trend is just going to, we're going to see some big stuff happen with this, and it is going to cause a lot of enterprises to rethink how do we approach some of these questions.
And again, if you're with a phone that turns into a desktop, for example, if your desktop virtualization strategy is established and your mobile device management strategy is established, then it really does become much more of a question of what does this device mean to us strategically, instead of worrying about the tactics of how do we provision it and secure it.
And you couple that with, of course, the WannaCry events over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to hear about that a lot over the next couple of days. But thinking this through, that with all these different devices, again, that I can still deliver these other capabilities, maybe in a way that's more secure by serving them up in a workspace that allows me to support all of those devices.
Yeah, the WannaCry has been very interesting because I don't know whether to take solace in that the answer is as simple as patching and upgrading, or to be very to despair that the answer is as simple as updating and patching. And we know that migrating off of legacy systems can be extremely difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my question is, I'm spending the entire week in conferences. My open question, and maybe we can do a show of hands. there are a lot of incidents out there that we say, okay, this is a wake-up call for a certain type of security procedure, or this is a wake-up call, like now we really do need to finally get off XP or something like that. So these wake-up calls, unfortunately, they happen on a regular basis. But let's see a show of hands in the room for anybody thinks that okay, WannaCry, this is the wake-up call for the one hand. Okay.
Pretty cynical bunch here. So shit's going to get worse before it gets better, I think, is the consensus here, and I.
Or everybody's already off XP and Server 2003, and.
But if it's not that, then it's probably going to be something else. So the threats are going to keep coming. We're seeing, and I can say again on the mobile side, I know Intel produces a report through their security division that they've seen 120% increase sort of year over year in terms of the number of malware variants that they're tracking. And that's just on the mobile side. PC side, of course, this example is going to be something that gets more attention and is going to drive more activity. So I do agree. I think that this may be something that wakes people up a little bit, but we've got a long way to go before this problem's ever going to be solved, and it probably will get worse before it gets better.
Well, should we find maybe a more optimistic note to end in our last 2.5 minutes on? Let me ask you, what the most excited of the things that we haven't gotten to already, what are you most excited about for 2017?
Well, we have touched on them on a couple of the acquisitions that we've been through. I think we're going to have a lot more news, as I said, to come on particularly how we look at app management and what additional visibility we can provide to our customers through that process. In our corner of the market here as well, we're really now just getting going with some of the interesting work with Dell, our new parent, and how do we integrate the different pieces that we have through the acquisition of Dell by EMC to AirWatch and VMware. That's an area that we see a lot of room for us to do some smart stuff as well, and particularly as we push more and more into UEM and PC management, being able to do things at a much deeper level on the machine, and what sort of capabilities does that serve up?
Yeah, and on the side that another side that we got to a little bit earlier, but so on our side at TechTarget, we do a lot of research because we have millions, over 10 million members. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but we see what they're researching on and interested in, and ask them about their priorities for 2017. And in terms of big new projects for 2017, some of the highest ones were deploy mobile collaboration applications and look into mobile app development platforms. And this is not across EUC. This is across all of IT projects, and those were number 4 and 5 out of like the top 20 IT projects for 2017.
Wow!
So that's pretty exciting.
Well, I think it's certainly very exciting for us. That's the pool we swim in, and I think for most people in this room, that's got to be something that sort of validates the work that people are doing here.
Well, Kevin, it was really a pleasure talking to you. And I, of course, want to say thank you to nGage and Phil and Paul for having me here, and good talking to you.
Great talking to you. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
You guys want to cut out without questions? Any questions? Hey, I know this guy. Could you say your name and your company, please, before the question?
George McQuillister, Golden State Warriors. No, I'm sorry.
You know, I'm from Akron, Ohio.
Oh, then I should make a really hard question for you
geez,
right now.
I set myself up for a super hard question.
I'm going to throw this out to both of you guys. A lot of large enterprises are making a lot of adaptation of cloud environments, either on-prem or hybrid. And would either of you care to speak to kind of your perspective on that? And Kevin, taking into consideration a recent acquisition you mentioned with regards to Apptelligent, do you see acquisitions like that continuing to occur, and how would that possibly influence the marketplace?
So I'll answer briefly. Yeah, I do think we're going to continue to see a lot more sort of point acquisitions like that, and a convergence of vendors as the space really continues to mature. so that I don't have maybe 4 or 5 different products when I can pull things together into one tool set and have them integrate in ways that really add value, because it is a more cohesive fabric of tools. It's going to make more sense, whether we're talking about moving from apps and app management on-prem to doing it in the cloud. So our acquisition is certainly part of that. There was another one that VMware did a few weeks ago that I should point out as well that we're very excited about, Wavefront, which really targets those SaaS apps and management and analytics around those. So this is clearly an area that we're pushing hard on and will be part of that trend.
Yeah, and of course, among another bit of our survey data that I had been looking at just before we came here is among desktop or EUC projects, of course, from 2016 to 2017, SaaS projects were the biggest growth from those 2 years. So of course, that's a good time for all of us that like to use SaaS products, and of course, identity and goes along with that.
All that much more important, yeah.
Hi, Melanie Seekins from Altria. I have a question. When we start thinking about Android, you were talking about the fragmentation there. Android's making great strides at making a more solid operating system with their new Android O. How do you think that's going to play into whether or not people are going to actually adopt VDI or any sort of virtualization on a handheld if we eliminate the Android fragmentation?
You want to go first, or?
Well, so it sounds like there were a couple of different things in there. The Android for Work, or I should still, it's still sometimes hard to not say Android for Work when we should be saying Android Enterprise. I think we're all very excited about that. And as I was mentioning earlier, we have some situations where there are times that call for delivering virtually our legacy applications and delivering locally newer applications as native mobile apps. And to me, the interesting and key part is that the identity management layer underneath those, to bring those all together, to at least make it a smooth experience for the user, whether they're heading to a virtual application or a local native app on their device, that the identity management system can know who that user is and make a smooth experience for both of those types of applications is the key underlying component.
Yeah, I would agree, Melanie. I think so many of the organizations we talk to today still have, north of 500, 1,000, 10,000 applications that they're trying to manage. And while Android O brings together a lot of answers to some of the problems that Android's perhaps suffered from over the years, and fragmentation is the biggest one, it helps giving us that foundational layer, but it doesn't necessarily solve for, I have this critical app and I have to run it on IE7, craziness like that still persists in so many organizations today. If I'm going to serve it up to the user, or I could serve it up to a user on a device, it'll be a little easier because of some of the things that we're going to get with Android O, but it still doesn't address the fact that there's massive investments in these apps, and trying to bring those forward are going to be really expensive otherwise.
This will be the last question.
My name is Sal Sorrentino. I work for an elevator company now. Used to work for an HVAC company. So my question is relative to working in an industrial environment. In the case, in particular, service people who are using mobile devices to perform their work. And there's a safety issue. And I haven't heard very much about dialogue-based interfaces that allow you to use both your hands and to interact with your computer with voice rather than with visual, because even Google Glass, I've heard of people paying so much attention to Google Glass, they step off a platform and there's injury. So I just wonder what your thoughts on that were.
Well, that's another thing where I see, my usage of Siri and other voice-based interfaces has been climbing as the accuracy and of the transcription and such has gotten better. And that's one of those places where we can say, hey, this is a practical result of machine learning and artificial intelligence, that's something that's improving our lives right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's a very interesting area to look at to see how this is going to evolve over the next couple of years. On the safety side, I think what we've heard perhaps most was we're giving employees all these critical applications and we expect them to do things in them, and it's on a mobile device. You know, what sort of liability does that create for us as a company, for them as an individual, if that person, you know, part of their job is to drive? So we did start some work around that, and you see things now like velocity fencing as a term to say, while someone's moving at a certain rate of speed, let's turn off certain capabilities if it's more than maybe 2 miles an hour. But I agree with the sentiment that machine learning's got a real, or let's say, you know, the AI aspects of these devices is really got some tremendous potential here if we can get it to that point. So I take it out of your visual field of reference and allow me to talk. You know, I suspect if someone's going to do research here and they're going to say that there's still some level of impairment, that you're not thinking about maybe driving or what you're supposed to be doing when you're also doing these things simultaneously. It's an interesting area.